We want to turn our attention back to putting Americans to work. And to help us understand how we do that and where we go from here, we invite back to the program Gary Cohn, the former director of the National Economic Council and an advisor to President Trump. Gary, it's good to see you.
Adam, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
You have pointed out most recently in an op-ed in the Washington Post that, quote, the challenge for policymakers today is calibrating the transition from rapid response to sustainable recovery. And one of the ways to do that is the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, which this morning you tweeted, the prioritized Paycheck Protection Program, P4 as you call it. The P4 Act introduced in the Senate makes a lot of sense. Why do you think it makes a lot of sense?
So Adam, if you think back to where we have been and where we are today, we have evolved from really emergency actions of shutting down the entire U.S. economy and having everyone stay at home to we're now allowing certain states to open at different paces and businesses are evolving at different rates. But even in the states that are allowing businesses to open, most of those businesses still today are operating at 20, 30, 40%. No one is really back to 100% of where they were pre-crisis. And the PPP plan was initially designed to keep people off unemployment and allow them to stay attached to their business so they knew where they were working and they knew where they would be going back to. The program initially had an 8-week period. They then much later extended it to 12 weeks. I think most companies, when they got the money, they budgeted on an 8-week period. If you did that, your money is running out right now. So you're at this really crucial inflection point where you're saying, look, I kept you on as an employee. I want to keep you on, but my government stimulus has run out. If I can get more money from the government right now, I would love to keep you on. My business is growing every day, but I'm still at 30 or 40% of capacity. And what I'm saying in the 4 Ps is for small private businesses, not public companies, that think that they're going to continue to grow, we should help these companies retain their employees. And I think it's very important. The last thing we want to do right now is throw a bunch of people back into the ranks of the unemployed.
Gary, it's Julie here. So one sort of to take a step back question for a moment. Even if a company is growing, as you say, they might be at a fraction of where they were before. They might also not be growing at all, right? Because we still do have shutdowns in a number of places and reclosings in a number of places. Why is it preferable for money to flow through a business versus someone just get unemployment through the government?
Well, if they're getting unemployment, basically they have no attachment whatsoever. And to the extent that the business feels like they're going to reopen, if I turn to a business and say, look, you can reopen next week, but you've terminated all your employees, instead of opening and serving clients next week, you have to open next week and start hiring back employees. So the whole process to serve your clients and be in business takes dramatically longer because you have to go through the whole onboarding process of your workers. It makes much more sense from an economic standpoint to keep your workers attached. They know where they're going back, and having the ability to ramp up your business, literally, in some businesses it's overnight. If you're a barber shop or a hairdresser, neither of which I need, you can literally turn the lights back on and open up the barbershop. And if today you're a 10-chair barbershop and you're allowed to be at 30%, you call back 3 barbers. If in a week from now you go to 40%, you call back a 4th, and so on. But if you terminate all those employees, you can't just call them back and say, hey, we're allowed to go back by 1 more employee next week. You have to start interviewing, you have to hire, you have to go through the onboarding process, and that just slows down economic development.
Gary, you've pointed out that enhanced unemployment benefits created a disincentive for people to work. And you've actually talked about enhanced incentives to get people back on the job. What are those enhanced incentives?
So look, the government was trying to do all of the right things, and I don't want to criticize them. We had an extraordinary period in this history of the economy, and the government was trying to throw money at the situation, and they wanted to make sure Americans had disposable income. But by giving enhanced unemployment benefits to people, which were higher value than returning to the workforce, you literally encourage people not to go back to the workforce. So when their employer called them back and said, hey, look, I've got great news. You can come back to work tomorrow. We want to hire you back. They said, well, not so fast. I'm actually in a better position being unemployed. Could you call me in July when my benefits run out? That's not the position we want to be in. We never want government benefits to disincentivize people to go back into the workforce. So what I'm calling for is a system that makes sense, that allows people to survive, allows people to eat, allows people to feed their family, but also simultaneously incentivizes them to go back in and participate in the workforce.
Gary, it's Brian Chung here. So on that point, it seems like there is discussion about another stimulus package coming. It seems like you made your point pretty clear on where you land on the unemployment side of things. Do you think another stimulus package is necessary? And on that point, as people start to go back to work, what types of benefits, what types of things would you like to see Congress put into that package?
Yeah. So Brian, look, I think definitely we're going to need another stimulus package. I haven't stopped saying this in the last 6 weeks. When you look at the position of where the states are from a financial situation, the states have really taken the brunt of this. And I'm not looking to bail out states. I think that we need to return the states to the financial position they were in, let's call it March 15th, but we can argue about a date, a week earlier, a week later. But in this period of time, if you think of what's fallen on the states have had to pay many of the unemployment claims. They've had to pay many of the medical claims while simultaneously losing the vast source of the revenue. And in many states, that's sales tax or it's income tax. So they've had the double whammy of having their expenses go up while their revenue is going down. And I think the federal government needs to step in and help the states. And this is not a blue issue. It's not a red issue. It's an every state issue. The other area where I think it's imperative that we get money back in the system is the hospital network. Everyone thinks we're having a healthcare crisis, so therefore the hospitals must be thriving. It's actually the complete opposite. Every hospital in this country shut down and made themselves 100% available to treat COVID patients, which means they stopped doing everything else except emergency life-saving procedures. The amount of money that the hospital system has lost is just extraordinary. Many hospitals are going to go out of business. They're going to go bankrupt. They're going to breach all of their bond covenants, and they're going to have enormous financial difficulty. I think it would be absolutely horrible for us to come out of a healthcare crisis in this country and have a weaker healthcare system than we went in. And so therefore, we need to make sure that the hospitals are returned back to the financial condition that they went into the crisis in.
Hey, Gary, it's Julia LaRoche. I want to talk just more broadly about the economy because, as we know, the bulk of our economy is the services industry. It makes up 70% of our economy, our GDP. And it makes you wonder, though, as we're talking about reopening, do we need to rethink our economy? Do we need to move more toward manufacturing, just based on what we saw with our own supply chains and the need to get PPE here? And then on top of that, do we also need to rethink labor, specifically the cost of labor, living wages as we come through this?
Julia, all those are really good points. We have been trending over the last 100 years away from a manufacturing economy more and more towards a service economy. And look, fundamentally, that is the right answer. We are part of a global economy. If we can import goods at a lower price than we can manufacture them in the United States, that means that U.S. consumers have more disposable income to buy on services that we produce here in the United States. So fundamentally, I agree with that. That said, we've learned an awful lot about domestic security in the last 100 plus days here in the United States. And I think we have to take a very serious look at our own domestic security. And in that, we have to look, where are we exposed? Are we exposed on our PPE, as you point? Do we have a system that allows us to be self-sustaining? Do we need to encourage that manufacturing here in the United States? What about our pharmaceuticals? We need to produce some of these pharmaceuticals here in the United States. Our food supply chain, there was lots of discussion about food supply chains as we saw massive outbreaks in some food processing plants and some beef plants and some pork processing plants. So we now have a lot more information about the vulnerabilities within our system. And I would agree that we need to think more about our domestic security and protecting ourselves. So I would expect there to be a small movement in trend into some more manufacturing jobs as we make ourselves more domestically secure. On the wage issue, look, this is not a new issue. We did not need a pandemic or a COVID crisis to awaken us to the issue that we have had a wealth inequality issue here in the United States for a long period of time. This was a discussion last year, it was a discussion now, and maybe we are at a time where we can start doing something about it. We are going to have to find a way, and we're going to have to make it work, that we raise wages at the bottom end of the pay cycle. That's just what we're going to have to do. And look, does that mean that goods are going to cost more? Yes. Does it mean that services are going to cost more? Yes. All these things are going to happen, but net, it's going to mean that we're a better, safer country.
Gary, the last time you were on with us, you talked about the importance of testing to reopen the U.S. economy. So I appreciate the sort of longer term look at wages and the economic structure. But right now, things are pretty bad in the United States. We just went through one of the biggest day over day increases ever in coronavirus cases. The EU is talking about banning U.S. travelers. Some states are requiring quarantines if you travel from other states. How can we reopen when things still look pretty dire on the coronavirus front?
Well, Julia, it's in many respects, we are a lot smarter today than we were in March when we made what at the time seemed like the complete appropriate decision to shut down our economy, tell everyone to stay at home. You know, the medical community is smarter, the hospitals are smarter, our treatments are better, and we have a lot more economic data, and we know how the disease is transmitted. So I think we have to take the knowledge that we've gained over the last 100 days, and we have to implement that. We've also learned, and we've learned the harsh reality, that by shutting down the economy and telling the large businesses, the largest business in the country, that they're essential, and the smallest businesses, the local businesses, the family-owned businesses, the women-owned businesses, the minority-owned businesses, that you're not essential, even though you sell the same goods that you can buy at the largest companies, to shut down, we know that that's a problem, and we know that we shouldn't do that. In fact, the smaller stores can manage themselves better. They can insist that you wear masks. They can insist that there's only one or two people in the store. They can take temperatures before you walk in the store. We are much smarter. We have to use our knowledge right now to allow the economy to continue to survive and hopefully thrive, and allow us to evolve here. We right now are in a continuous educational position, and we have to continue to use that to grow the economy, or at least stabilize the economy.
Gary, when you talk about stabilizing the economy, one of the issues is taxation. The administration's talking about a payroll tax holiday, but you've pointed out that would have limited effect because it would only benefit those who are right now working. So what do you propose? And also there's talk that Joe Biden, if he were to win the election, would actually raise the corporate tax rate. You were part of the historic movement to cut corporate taxes. Biden talking about potentially a 28% corporate tax rate. So how do you address all of that?
So on the corporate tax rate, I'm actually okay at 28%. The level we got to in our tax plan on the corporate side was actually a bit lower than I thought we needed to go. We had come down from 35, getting down in the low 20s was probably lower than we needed to go. I always thought there was a compromise rate sort of in the mid 20s that made sense. I'll remind everyone, though, that the corporate tax rate is not where we collect a lot of dollars. So the difference between going from 35 to 21 was less than $100 billion a year. We don't collect a lot of money in the corporate tax rate. But I also will remind people that if you look at our tax bill, it was the Tax and Jobs Act. And one of the reasons that we cut the corporate tax rate in the United States was to create jobs and re-domicile business in the United States and make the United States competitive from a tax standpoint. If we go to 28%, that's probably the top end of the range that we can go to and be competitive with the rest of the world. It's at the outer bounds of my limit of acceptability. I can live with 28. But we have to compete with the rest of the world. You can still go to Ireland and you can still go to Singapore. And you can get tax rates in the high single digits to very low teens. So that's a competitive disadvantage that we have. And when you move your company because of tax rates, you're moving jobs. So ultimately, the reason we lowered tax rates, corporate tax rates, was to bring jobs back to the United States. And if you look at the data back at the beginning of the year, we had record low unemployment rate. We were creating jobs. So I don't want to derail that. But on the other hand, in this environment, we're in an extraordinary period of time. I've said that from a tax standpoint, just about everything has to be on the table right now. We've spent multiple trillions of dollars in stimulus. We're going to have to pay for it one way or another. You just can't keep spending money and not talk about the revenue side of the equation.
Gary, I got to tell you, I was at Pencil and Pads with you back in Washington when we were moving towards tax reform. And for you to say what you just said, that's going to be headlines. The Journal's going to pick up on that. Everyone's going to pick up on that. How do you get the corporate community to buy into what you just said about the corporate tax rate going back to 28%?
I think the corporate community is going to be fine with that. Look, I always thought that the corporate community was going to be fine with something in the mid-20s. And in fact, when we were doing tax reform, whether it was the Business Roundtable or any of the other big corporate groups that we went to, they all sort of let us know that they were fine with a mid-20% corporate tax rate.
Gary, the last time you were on with us, I believe Adam asked you about potentially returning to the Trump administration at some point. I want to flip that on its head. You are a registered Democrat, I believe, still.
Yep.
And you just told us you would be on board with that corporate tax plan that, or at least that part of it that Joe Biden has floated. Are you in talks with the Biden campaign at all? Would you be up for a post in that administration, or has your involvement with the Trump administration maybe made that a bit tricky?
I don't think one has anything to do with the other, to be honest with you. What I'm happy to say is serving my country was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And I'm proud to have done it. And if I was asked to serve again, I probably would be willing to do it. It was a great honor to be able to serve my country.
Gary, we're going to give you the last word, but I want to put a little caveat on it. What would you say to those still in the administration, whether it be Treasury Secretary Mnuchin or President Trump, if you could get them on the phone today about getting this economy back on track?
So ultimately, it is about containment of the virus. We cannot deny the facts of the virus. And the economy is dependent on people feeling secure to leave their house, feeling healthy, and feeling like they can go out and live their lives as normally as they can. So if that's wearing masks, which I do every time I leave my house, it's wearing a mask. If it's sanitizing your hands, every time you go in a place, it's sanitizing your hands. If it's having your temperature taken when you walk in certain places to be able to walk in, have your temperature taken. None of those things matter in the long run. What matters in the long run is that people feel safe and secure to re-engage in the economy. And if we feel safe and secure to re-engage, things will naturally open and the economy will naturally grow. And we are one of the most resilient countries in the world. And we will be talking about this as it was in the past and say, remember when. And we can be talking about remember when relatively quickly if we're willing to do the right things.
Gary Cohn is the former director of the National Economic Council and an advisor to President Trump. We always appreciate your being here on The Move. All the best to you, Gary.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.